And welcome back in. It's Gridiron 360. Dave and Bill getting back at you. Thanks for listening. We're talking 2020 NFL draft prospects. In our last cast, we were in the Big Ten because we're going conference by conference. We did our really the top 12 in the Big Ten as we saw it and as a lot of the different sites saw it. So what we want to do now is go through other names of note. This will be not as in-depth, but we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. God bless you.
Thank you.
And we'll go with quarterbacks first. So there are 3 quarterbacks from the Big Ten that are eligible for this draft. You've got Mr. Nate Stanley of Iowa, Mr. Shea Patterson of Michigan, Mr. Brian Lewerke of Michigan State. Now, before we dive in, Dave, thoughts like you just shared with me about quarterbacks draft.
I don't feel very excited about Big Ten quarterbacks. I'm going to be real honest with you. I've never really been really excited about big-time quarterbacks.
Tom Brady.
I know, but, you know, I think a lot of what you get, and I think these guys kind of fall into that species, is you get big guys, big arms, limited to marginal mobility, and they're slow to read. They rely. I mean, we're going to talk about Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State.
Let's be honest. The whole Big Ten is historically and even at present, for the most part, sans maybe a couple teams changing the way they are. It's we've said it before. It's in the trenches. It's ground and pound,
yep.
Running the football. So less work for the quarterbacks.
Yeah,
not that they don't have to work, but it's just more of a run first.
They don't run. There's not a lot of an imaginative teams from a passing perspective, especially in the Big Ten. I think these guys kind of fit that mold. I think they're, I look at these guys, and if they're lucky, they're career backups. But they're worth talking about for the reason is because you never know. I mean, you can go back, you can say Tom Brady, but let's be honest, that's 20 years ago.
Yep.
Okay, so you got that. You can look at Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been a very maligned quarterback. He's gotten himself paid, but so is Chase Daniel. So as we know, so this is just one of those guys, that I don't know. I don't see it. So let's just get into it. Let's.
All right. So the first guy, and now mind you, by most accounts in terms of quarterback ranking for this draft, I'm seeing all 3 of these guys land in the top 20. Again, something else he said to me outside of really the top 3, if you want to go 5 quarterbacks, it starts to get a little bit of muddied waters. In terms of top 10, Nate Stanley is actually listed in there at number 9, so we'll start with him. That's quarterbacks overall for the draft. He is from Menominee, Wisconsin. He's actually he wanted to go to Wisconsin, and they passed up on him. He's a senior that ended up at Iowa playing for the Hawkeyes at 6'4", 235, 32 and 5/8 inch arms, 10-inch hands, so he meets that right there at the Mendoza line for him.
Yep.
Ran a 4.81 at the combine. So there's a comp here of Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State. He's not really done a whole lot yet, but
I think the comp from a skill set is actually, I got to be honest with you, some of the comps I don't really bite, but it's coming from the NFL Combine, which is kind of it's a conglomeration of scouts who are far more skilled than I am. But this one makes a lot of sense to me, except the difference is I didn't see this guy put the ball down field with the quantity that Mason Rudolph did in college.
Yeah, definitely different. Now, and the leagues are different. Now, this is a guy that hasn't exceeded a 60% completion percentage in his career. Pretty much he started three of his years there. Got some action his freshman year. He never went over 3,000 yards. In his junior season, he had 26 touchdowns both years, 6 picks and 10 picks consecutively or respectively between 17 and 18. Then this last year, he went from 26 TDs to 16 TDs, and 7 picks. Now, I told you a lot of the highlight tape, if you watch it from him, is from junior year 18. And
I think he's in the top 9 because of that. I don't think he's – I think
TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. Both tight ends who went in the first round last year. Really good. I mean, tight ends can take a little bit to develop, but, I mean, you saw the skill there, but that was it. Then I saw some more recent tape, and it was like snippet from this last year was all the Indiana game.
Well, got to admit, we said this. We talked a lot about this team during the year. They are deadly at home. So we watched some of their games because there was some big games that they came up against, playing Penn State, played Wisconsin, obviously. I'm not sure if that one was at home, but I know the Penn State one was. But we always talked about that. What is it, Kinnick Stadium?
Yeah, Kinnick.
Kinnick, it's a tough place to play. But when you watch these games, he never stood out to me.
Well, he's a big kid. I mean, he's got some measurables from that perspective. But it's funny, he seems to, when they do drop back to pass, he's modestly elusive. He can get out of the pocket, and he keeps his eyes downfield. He's actually not bad when he's got a long field, using his eyes to move the safeties around and move, pieces around when he's dropping back to throw. When he gets in the red zone, he is just dialed in on the guy every time that he's thrown to, every time.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's – again, I look at these guys. They're the types of guys that if they last in the NFL, and I don't feel like any one of these 3 that we're going to talk about are guaranteed to last in the NFL. But if they last in the NFL, Mason Rudolph, here's why it makes the most sense to me. All right, you got the body size and all that kind of stuff, the minimal mobility, and an understanding because, one, he's played multiple years as a starter, so he's got some experience. But what I do look at is – nobody's clamoring for Mason Rudolph to compete with Ben Roethlisberger, who is at the end of his career, to compete with him coming into this year. And you can take the Myles Garrett situation with him out of the mix. I know that polarized some feelings towards him, but he's a guy that comes in and fills in. And I don't think anybody after a couple of games with him prior to that was like, oh my God, this is the guy. And I just think that's who these guys are going to be. Like, I think of guys like, truthfully, who was probably the most successful at being this guy because he actually put together a decent pro career, but was like Kerry Collins out of Penn State.
Yeah.
Kerry Collins had that big arm. There was a lot to like, but really when it came down to it, you put the ball in his hands in more games than you got to win, and you're not going to win them.
Yeah, he's a game manager. Did lead us to a Super Bowl, but we lost. But
right. But that was a very good defensive team. These are guys that are not. I've never watched them take over a game. I've never watched Nate Stanley and gone like, he took over the game.
No, none of these guys. And the next guy, and this is funny because just from watching their play especially on TV, this guy actually seemed bigger than Stanley to me in terms of height, but is not. Shreveport, Louisiana native, a senior from the University of Michigan Wolverines, quarterback Shea Patterson, stands at 6'1". I thought he was bigger than that. 212.
I did think he was a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I thought he was huge.
No, but 30.5-inch arms, 9 3/8-inch hands, ran a 4.71 at the combine. A little undersized. I didn't really understand that. Now, this is a transfer.
Yep.
From, where was he, Ole Miss?
Yep.
I didn't think he was all that at Ole Miss. He got there. I think there's guys. I've said it when we talk college all the time. We're talking this class. Just the underwhelming performance of Shea Patterson, and whether it be due to the offense, the way they ran it, or whatever, I just felt underwhelmed. And they had, and I think he was a 5-star, one of the best in the country,
he was.
and Dylan McCaffrey sitting in the wings.
Well, he was that coming out. He was a high draft. He was a high recruit.
But he wasn't getting it done, and McCaffrey really saw the field. Now, we don't know what they see in practice and behind closed doors. McCaffrey's been there, I think he's going into year 3, and still hasn't really officially started seeing somebody being injured.
Yeah, well, he walked in. Listen. The bag man showed up down at Ole Miss, and the bag man had been showing up all along. I think he went to a place that was in chaos, he was not coached well. I think he developed a lot of bad habits. And then he went to Michigan. Now think about that. You talk about Michigan. You and I talked quite a bit about this year when we were talking about the team because we saw. I forget the game where McCaffrey came in. He got hurt. He got dinged up for for like a series. And I saw it and I was like, I kind of like what this kid's showing me a little bit. Nothing spectacular, but he just seemed to have a grasp. We talk about this over and over again. The pedigree. He's got a dad and a brother that were very successful in the NFL at different positions, but still successful.
Yeah.
But here was the thing about Shea Patterson was, you think about what he walked into at Michigan. When he went to Michigan, it was finally like, okay, this kid's going to get good coaching because he's with Jim Harbaugh, the college football whisperer.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, then all of a sudden, after that first year, it did not go according to plan. I think some of that falls on Shea Patterson. Some of that falls on Michigan. Michigan made some changes in their coaching staff. And here was the thing. The pressure was on, and it's still on Harbaugh. There was some concern about whether them wanting to take a walk from him. And, I mean, they got a lot of money invested in this guy. So I think Shea Patterson played because, you talk about, you see this with coaches. There's the development because, you don't always usually get that cycle. Like Clemson's going to walk into a really good situation. They got a 5-star kid that chased off other 5-star kids and lived up to the hype, and he's going to do it for one more year in Trevor Lawrence. And you got a guy like a Gunleye or
TJ
Uyunglele, whatever. I'm going to call him DJ Nutsack when I have to play against him. I know. But the point is he's going to sit for a year behind this kid, and then he's going to come in. But most teams do not get that fluid of a situation. You look at Ohio State and Georgia, teams that are changing quarterbacks and, had recruits leaving and going and all that. Shea Patterson, I think the situation was, when you're in a pressure situation as a coach, you have to go, who gives me the best chance to win today? Whereas when you're stable in a program, you go, what's best for my program long term? To me and you, I think we saw at least like giving McCaffrey a shot last year would have made sense.
Sure.
But Harbaugh might not have gotten the next year to look at it. So I think that's why you saw Shea Patterson. And I think halfway through the year you saw him play a little bit better. Like I thought one of his best games was Penn State. I thought it was one of his best games. But I still look at it and go, it's a kid that I think came out with a little bit of a arrogance to him, and maybe not in personality, but just a thought of like, that happens. When you're a 5-star and you get your butt kissed, you come out that way, and I think he was coached poorly, and I think he struggled to get back to that elite level talent, and it happens, and it's a shame, but when I watched him play, again,
nothing special.
I don't get giddy about it.
Well, here's 18 stats. Was 64%, just a little hair over. Completion percentage, 2,600 yards, 22 TDs to 7 picks. Last year, 56% completion percentage, just over 3,000 yards, 23 TDs to 8 picks. So there you have it, Shea Patterson, Michigan. The final guy that's eligible for the draft out of the Big Ten from a quarterback perspective is Mr. Brian Lewerke from Michigan State, from Phoenix, Arizona, originally at 6'3", 216 pounds. He is a senior. I'll run down his stats real quick. He too never exceeded a 60% completion percentage, had just over 2,000 yards in 18, just over 3,000 in 19, 8 TDs to 11 picks in 18, 17 TDs to 13 picks in 2013.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at this guy, like I honestly, when I look at Kirk Cousins, Connor Cook?
Connor Cook, yeah.
And then this guy, I kind of see the same thing, the same type of player, and Cousins was just the best of all of them, but when they were in college, the thing I don't like about Lewerke is I never really saw him get better. I saw the same guy for certainly for the last 2 years. You might add stats to that, but I mean, I remember watching the Arizona State-Michigan State game this year. That was a game that was supposed to have some offense. What was the score? 10-7
yeah,
was the final score. And I mean, and Michigan State had lots of problems this year. They definitely took a step back, but I don't know. I look at the kid. He doesn't strike me as somebody that sees the field really well. You also don't know because, the whole situation with D'Antonio, that's kind of an ugly situation.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot more to that walking away than meets the eye. And so you don't know kind of what was going on from a buzz, within the team. But stiff. Looks very stiff to me. Looks like he gets happy feet, not so much running, but just like can't settle himself and set himself in a condensed pocket. And that's the NFL. Like, that is the NFL. That is what you are going to live with. There is no such thing as a clean pocket in the NFL unless you're the Dallas Cowboys and you're running the ball.
Yeah.
And even that's dying, as you could see by their record last year. There's just not many deals like that.
All right, so we're going to move on now. There are 4 running backs in the Big Ten that are also eligible for the draft this year. You have got Anthony McFarland from Maryland, his teammate Javon Leake from Maryland, Reggie Corbin, Illinois, and Rodney Smith from Minnesota. So we'll start out. Mr. McFarland for the Maryland Terrapins from Hyattsville, Maryland, a redshirt sophomore, stands at 5'8", 208, 33/8" arms, 8 7/8" hands. Not big hands at all. 4'4", 40. He's had some injuries over his career. If you remember, not this past season, the season before, didn't Maryland beat Ohio State? I feel maybe not.
No,
I
I
feel
know
like
they
Maryland
beat 'em.
upset somebody. I feel like maybe it was Texas or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, they've beaten Texas 2 years in a row, but I don't know if that was last year. I think it was the year before.
Okay. Well, it was the year before this past one where he had like 3 touchdowns or 3 huge runs against Ohio State, and he looked really good. The beginning of 2019, I believe they had kind of a new system in place. The offense for Maryland was firing.
It's probably first 3 games. They
was-
scored
he-
like 66 points. I think they had the most points after 2 games.
He was looking
in college
awesome.
football.
He seemed like he was something, and then they just fell off a map.
Well, in fairness to the running backs there, if you'll remember, their quarterback was the transfer out of Virginia Tech.
Yep.
Oh, my God. I'm blanking.
Thomas? No, it wasn't Logan.
No, not Logan Thomas. All right. Anyway, I'll get back to it in a second. But, and he played pretty well, but they were running like crazy. I want to say they scored something like 130 points in their first 2 games.
It was crazy.
And this was they looked like, oh my gosh, they had kind of turned a corner. And I will tell you, the one thing that stuck out with me with Anthony McFarland in those games, because those are games kind of you're going to because it was like they were playing like a video game.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly
you turned him
what
on.
it was.
When he burst through and got to the next level, he was gone. With 4.4 speed, that makes complete sense to me. He's not a big guy overall. Like, he's just
he
not.
doesn't have great vision. Doesn't have great. There's nothing. As they started to fall off, you could see he was not able to create anything on his own.
Right. Now, here is something I'm gonna mention this. I want to take it for what it is. But with Anthony McFarland, this just came out, and this is, again, I want to take this with a grain of salt. It's a Bleacher Report article, but it says it comes from the source is an NFL scout, and said that his character the words used were atrocious, and he's like a little child, and they've taken him fully off the draft board. I don't want to speak to the kid's character. I'm just stating what was reported from an NFL scout. But that will be interesting to see because this guy was generally thought of as a late-round guy and maybe a guy that you can fit into your offense and might end up being a little bit of a steal. But as we all know, if there is truly character issues with this guy that are widely known as opposed to narrowly known or narrowly believed, that'd be something that could impact him. And I look at him probably as, certainly not a starting back in the NFL, but a complementary back potential, just given his size and some of his skill set. The one thing that does concern me is his pass blocking is known as being pretty poor, which if you're going to be the speed guy, and especially if you're going to have any kind of hands out of the backfield, you got to be able to pass protect. So that may also really kind of ding him. I can see why he's back where he's at. I also believe this is a very deep running back class. So there's a lot of diamonds in the rough that are going to be they're not really that rough.
Right.
They're already diamonds.
Yep. All right. Well, let's talk about his teammate from Greensboro, North Carolina, a junior for the Maryland Terrapins. Running back Javon Leake stands at 6 foot, 215, 31.5" arms, 9 5/8" hands. Ran a 4.65 40 at the combine. Didn't really ever, I don't even know if he ever really started. He was a complimentary back a lot of his career. He didn't get a ton of work, but there were times where I did see this kid flash. I think he's got maybe something in there. And let's understand something. Just as we talked about the high-end guys in this class and Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins, one of my concerns for those guys is they had the wheels run off of them.
Yeah.
This is a guy that hasn't. He's, from what I did see, I mean, again, not a ton you can really look at, but he's a guy that can run between the tackles. Won't necessarily maybe move a pile, but he can run between the tackles. I think he's better at that when he's told where to go rather than, I don't think his vision is awesome. If he was having to do like a gap block scheme and choose a hole, have his vision, I don't know if he's, that guy, but a guy that, that isn't afraid to run between the tackles, and if it can be elusive and potentially break some big plays.
Yeah, I mean, just some things that stand out to me. And again, this has more to do with the fact that how, we talked about good Maryland started off. They just really kind of went in the toilet. But this guy averaged 7 yards a carry on 100-plus carries. So it's, it's a decent sample size. It's not a heavy workload, certainly, but it's a decent sample size. And he also scored 8 touchdowns.
That NFL Combine profile, I think the comp they had was Tevin Coleman, and I could see that.
Yeah, now understand something. Tevin Coleman came in to Atlanta, and just to give you an idea, and was a backup running back to Devontae Freeman, who they had drafted and had started his career out very well with Atlanta, was one of the best backs in the league for at least a couple of years. He was a top 5 back as far as yards were concerned. And here you go. You get Tevin Coleman when got the big money to go out to San Francisco, and he's in a loaded backfield and is really – if he's healthy, he's the lead back.
Yeah,
he's the lead back.
Roll.
So, I mean, this kid's got some potential. I like the yards per carry. Certainly I haven't seen anything, character issues and things like that, which is a good thing to see. Not that just because his teammate has something or potentially has something.
What are you saying, Dave?
I'm putting a slight on him.
Okay,
I guess.
we're moving on.
But he's
he could be an interesting. He may get drafted very late.
Yeah, I think he could be a 6th rounder, something like that, and maybe be able to carve out a role for himself.
Yep. All right, let's move on for Upper Marlboro, Maryland. A senior for the Illinois Fighting Illini running back Reggie Corbin, standing at 5'10", 200 pounds. Let's see, just run down some statisticals. 2018, he had 128 carries for 1,085 yards, 9 TDs. He also had 16 reception for 176 yards, no TDs. Didn't lose a fumble. It didn't look like he lost a fumble in his whole career at Illinois. That's pretty nice.
Yep.
Let's see. Last year, 143 carries, but way, way down on his yardage to 675. Went from 2018 having basically an 8.5 yard per average yards per carry to a 4.7. Had only 7 TDs this past year, 3 receptions, 28 yards. I think there's another back on that team, but they surprised some people this year. I think they upset Wisconsin on a last-minute kick. I don't know a ton about Corbin, but I do remember his name being called a few times watching some Big Ten games or highlights.
Yeah, he's a shifty guy. It's going to be hard with Illinois. I mean, Illinois as a whole is not a good football program. They obviously, I will give them the game against Wisconsin. They shut down the running game for the first time that year.
Fighting.
So it was impressive what they were able to do. But overall, this program is a program that's been going backwards for a while. I looked on 2 different websites because I always just like to see the comps just because it gives me a good idea how the people view him. I saw one phrase that I know well because I've heard this said about one of my Bears, but is the human joystick. And then the other 2, I saw 2 different unrelated websites comp him to Darren Sproles.
Interesting.
So, here's the part that's kind of interesting to me is as a senior and coming out of Illinois, he was not invited to the combine.
Yeah.
So he was a combine snub. So does a kid that doesn't get to combine with all that's going on right now and the lack of contact with these guys, is this guy going to get a shot without that interaction? And like you said, you saw a downward trend in his his efficiency throughout the year. So could be interesting.
Yeah. I don't. That's. I don't know. There might be undrafted free agents.
Most of these guys we're going to talk about are going to be what they call like an undrafted or a priority free agent.
Right.
They're just going to be guys that are picked up at the end.
All right, the last guy on the list is from Jonesboro, Georgia, not far from here. A senior for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, running back Mr. Rodney Smith, standing at 5'11", 210. Let's see some stats for him. I think he got injured in 2018. But, I'm looking at, I think they might have even redshirted him. I don't see if he's a redshirt or not. But let's see. He has stats back to 2015. He had 157 carries. 2016, 240 carries. 2017, 229 carries. 2018, 25 carries. So he got hurt and redshirted last year.
Yeah, he had to have. That's 5 years.
Last year, 228 carries. That's a lot of work, bro. To his second year and last year broke 1,100 yards. Had 8 TDs last year. He also caught the ball 7 times for 70 yards. Doesn't appear to have any fumbles in his career. Not really look like to be a game-breaking guy, but a solid back. I do remember this guy being heavily involved in that big Penn State game this past year.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of he was able to just because they were slinging the ball over the yard, so he was a good change of pace back from throwing the ball to keeping them honest, keeping that defense in Penn State honest, which is a fast defense.
Yeah, I mean, you hear this term a lot. The way I saw him run is he's like a one-cut runner. He sees it, puts his foot in the ground, and then goes with it. I like what Minnesota did this year. I think that is a benefit to him. Just what they did as a team, and that he was a big part of that. Yep. Their offense was. You kind of really turned me on to it earlier than I probably would have, just given the fact that they were not playing a lot of teams, but then watching them play overall. And, certainly he was part of that. I certainly like their passing game with their quarterback and their receivers. Kind of stuck out to me, but this kid's good. I think he's got prototypical size in the sense that he's not lacking anywhere. He's not a burner or anything like that. He's not a home run threat, what I've seen. So we'll see. We'll see if he can translate that.
Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap that one up, and that we'll get on next. We'll probably do 2 more on the offense of other names. There are quite a lot of wide receivers and people I think we need to talk about, as well as linemen. It is the Big Ten, and maybe a tight end or 2, so maybe a couple more. But let's wrap this up. Quarterbacks, running backs, other names of note on offense in the Big Ten that are eligible for this year's 2020 NFL Draft. We will see you next time
on the gridiron.
Peace.